Have you ever found yourself wondering whether you're holding on to love or simply holding on to hope? There comes a moment in every person's life when the hardest decision isn't learning how to love someone. The hardest decision is realizing when love is no longer enough to save a relationship. Many people stay because they believe patience will eventually melt emotional walls. They convince themselves that if they become more understanding, more available, more forgiving, someday everything will change. But there is a dangerous difference between being patient and becoming trapped. When someone consistently chooses emotional distance over genuine connection, you begin living in a constant state of uncertainty. Every conversation feels like walking through a minefield. Every disagreement becomes another excuse for withdrawal. Every attempt to get closer somehow pushes them even farther away. Love was never designed to make you question your worth every single day. One of the greatest mistakes people make is believing that endurance automatically creates withstay intimacy. It doesn't. Time alone changes nothing. Patterns only become stronger when they are repeatedly rewarded. The first sign it's time to walk away appears when emotional distance becomes their lifestyle, instead of their temporary defense mechanism. Everyone needs space sometimes. Everyone processes emotions differently. But healthy people eventually return. Healthy people reconnect. Healthy people repair. Someone who continually disappears whenever emotions become uncomfortable isn't protecting the relationship. They're protecting themselves from vulnerability. Eventually, you stop asking what happened. Instead, you begin asking, when will they disappear again? That isn't peace. That's emotional survival. And no relationship should require survival mode. The second sign appears when your emotional needs are consistently treated as problems instead of priorities. Notice something powerful. Healthy love never punishes honesty. If expressing your feelings always results in silence, distance, coldness, or accusations that you're asking for too much, you're not experiencing emotional safety. You're experiencing emotional conditioning. Over time, you stop expressing yourself. You stop asking questions. You stop sharing fears. You convince yourself that silence creates harmony. But silence never heals pain. It simply buries it. And buried emotions don't disappear. They grow. Every ignored feeling becomes another brick in the invisible wall separating you from your own happiness. The third sign arrives quietly. You become the only one fighting for the relationship. You're always the first to text, the first to apologize, the first to fix misunderstandings, the first to compromise, the first to initiate difficult conversations. Eventually you realize you're carrying two people's emotional responsibilities. And here's the truth few people want to hear. No one can sustain a relationship alone. Love requires movement from both directions. A bridge cannot be built by one person standing on only one side. The fourth sign reveals itself through broken cycles of hope. You hear beautiful promises. I'll change. I'll try harder. I'm working on myself. I don't want to lose you. Those words feel comforting. For a few days, maybe even a few weeks. Then everything quietly returns to exactly where it started. Hope without action becomes emotional addiction. You begin surviving on tiny moments of affection while ignoring months of neglect. You celebrate breadcrumbs because you've forgotten what a full meal feels like. Real transformation is never measured by intentions. It's measured by consistency. Anyone can promise change during moments of fear. Very few people choose growth after the crisis has passed. The fifth sign is perhaps the most dangerous, because it happens so slowly that many people never flow. You begin disappearing, not physically, personally. You stop laughing the way you once did. You stop pursuing your dreams. You stop speaking honestly. You become smaller. You shrink your personality to avoid triggering someone else's discomfort. You silence your needs to keep temporary peace. You sacrifice your confidence hoping they'll finally feel safe enough to love you completely. But here's a truth worth remembering. You cannot build someone else's emotional security by destroying your own. The strongest relationships never require you to abandon yourself. They inspire you to become even more yourself. The sixth sign appears when anxiety becomes your normal emotional state. You wake up wondering how they feel today. You analyze every message, every pause, every facial expression, every delayed response. Your nervous system never rests. Your heart becomes exhausted trying to predict someone else's emotions. This isn't love. This is emotional hypervigilance. Peace should never feel unfamiliar inside a healthy relationship. Love should calm your mind far more often than it confuses it. The seventh and final sign is the one that changes everything. You realize you've stopped growing. Your purpose has become waiting. Waiting for them to open up. Waiting for them to commit. Waiting for them to heal. Waiting for them to choose you. Waiting for tomorrow. Waiting for next month. Waiting for next year. Life quietly passes while you're standing emotionally still. One of the greatest tragedies isn't losing someone you love. It's losing years of your own life waiting for someone who never truly arrives. Growth requires movement. Healing requires courage. Purpose requires action. And sometimes the most loving decision isn't holding on. It's releasing what continues to hold you back. Walking away is often misunderstood. People think it means giving up. Sometimes it's exactly the opposite. Sometimes walking away is choosing yourself for the very first time. It isn't revenge. It isn't punishment. It isn't proving someone wrong. It's recognizing that your peace has value. Your future has value. Your emotional health has value. Here's something deeply important. People often confuse compassion with obligation. You can understand someone's childhood wounds without sacrificing your future to them. You can empathize with someone's fears without allowing those fears to become your prison. Compassion never requires self-destruction. Healthy love includes empathy. But healthy love also includes boundaries. Boundaries are not walls. They're doors with locks. They allow healthy people inside while protecting you from patterns that repeatedly cause harm. There is incredible strength in saying, "I love you, but I refuse to lose myself." That sentence carries more wisdom than endless arguments ever could. Because real love never asks you to become emotionally homeless just so someone else can feel emotionally comfortable. The moment you stop chasing, something extraordinary begins to happen. Your energy returns. Your confidence slowly rebuilds. Your mind becomes quieter. Your sleep improves. Your focus returns to your dreams instead of someone else's inconsistency. And perhaps most importantly, you remember who you were before fear convinced you that being chosen mattered more than choosing yourself. Your worth has never depended on someone's ability to receive your love. Your value was established long before they entered your life. The right relationship will never require endless convincing. It won't demand constant emotional sacrifice. It won't reward you only after periods of suffering. Healthy love doesn't leave you guessing whether you're enough. It reminds you that you've always been enough. Sometimes the greatest act of courage isn't fighting harder. It's recognizing that peace is waiting on the other side of letting go. Because every ending that protects your dignity becomes the beginning of a stronger, wiser, and more fulfilled version of yourself. And when you finally choose your own peace over endless uncertainty, you don't lose love. You make room for the kind of love that never asks you to abandon yourself in order to keep it. Have you ever noticed how someone can tell you they care deeply about you, yet somehow their actions keep creating more distance instead of more closeness? At first, you tell yourself they're just overwhelmed. Maybe they're stressed with work. Maybe they've been hurt before. Maybe they simply need more time. So you become patient. You give them space. You avoid putting pressure on them because you believe understanding is the greatest expression of love. But as weeks turn into months, a painful pattern begins to emerge. Every time the relationship starts feeling closer, they pull away. Every meaningful conversation is followed by silence. Every moment of emotional intimacy is met with emotional withdrawal. Instead of building connection together, you're constantly trying to recover from another period of distance. This is where many people become trapped. They don't stay because the relationship is healthy. They stay because they keep believing the next conversation will finally change everything. The problem isn't that someone occasionally needs space. Every human being does. Healthy relationships respect individuality. They understand that people process emotions differently, and there are moments when solitude is necessary for reflection and emotional balance. Needing space is not the issue. The issue begins when distance becomes someone's permanent solution to every emotional challenge. Whenever conflict appears, they disappear. Whenever vulnerability is required, they shut down. Whenever commitment deepens, they create emotional walls. Instead of moving toward connection, they instinctively move away from it. Imagine trying to build a bridge, while the other person keeps removing the boards you'd brightly placed down. No matter how much effort you invest, the bridge never reaches the other side, because you're building alone. Relationships work exactly the same way. Emotional connection cannot exist if only one person is consistently moving forward, while the other keeps retreating. Many people mistake this cycle for mystery or emotional complexity. They think, if I can just understand them better, they'll eventually open up. While understanding another person's fears is valuable, understanding alone cannot replace willingness. Someone has to choose connection. They have to decide that the relationship is worth facing uncomfortable emotions. Without that decision, nothing truly changes. Over time, you begin adjusting your own behavior in ways you never expected. You stop bringing up difficult topics because you know they'll withdraw. You hide your disappointment because you don't want to push them further away. You convince yourself that asking for reassurance is being too needy, even though reassurance is a normal part of healthy intimacy. Slowly, you become an expert at managing their emotional comfort while completely ignoring your own. That's when love starts transforming into emotional survival. Instead of feeling secure, you become constantly alert. You analyze every text message, wondering why it took so long to receive a reply. You replay conversations in your mind, searching for something you might have said wrong. When they become distant, you immediately assume the responsibility belongs to you. You begin carrying emotional burdens that were never yours to carry. The saddest part is that this transformation happens so gradually you barely notice it. You don't wake up one morning and decide to lose your confidence. It happens one compromise at a time, one unanswered message at a time, one canceled plan at a time, one emotional withdrawal after another, until uncertainty becomes your normal reality. A healthy relationship should not leave you constantly wondering where you stand. It should not make consistency feel like a rare reward. It should not force you to earn basic emotional presence through endless patience and understanding. Real connection is built through mutual effort. Both people lean in. Both people communicate. Both people repair misunderstandings. Both people make the relationship feel emotionally safe. When only one person is doing that work, the relationship slowly becomes unbalanced. There comes a moment when you must ask yourself a difficult but necessary question. Are they creating temporary distance because they're working through something, or have they made emotional distance their permanent way of relating to you? The answer matters because temporary struggles can be healed together. Permanent patterns, however, only continue unless the person choosing them is genuinely willing to change. Love cannot flourish where emotional absence becomes the norm. No amount of loyalty, sacrifice, or unconditional affection can replace the willingness to two consistently show up for one another. A relationship is not sustained by promises alone, it is sustained by presence. And when someone repeatedly chooses distance over genuine connection, despite knowing the pain it causes, you must remember this powerful truth. You are not asking for too much by wanting closeness. You are simply asking for the very thing that love was always meant to provide. One of the quietest ways a relationship begins to break down is not through loud arguments or for dramatic betrayals. It happens when your emotions slowly stop mattering. At first, it's almost invisible. You express a concern, and it's brushed aside. You share something that's been weighing on your heart, and the conversation changes before your feelings are acknowledged. You reach for understanding, but instead you're met with indifference, defensiveness, or silence. In the beginning, you make excuses because that's what caring people often do. You tell yourself they're tired. You convince yourself they didn't mean to dismiss you. You believe they'll understand once the timing is better. So you wait. You become more patient. You try to communicate more gently, choosing your words carefully in hopes that this time they'll truly hear you. But eventually, a painful pattern starts to reveal itself. No matter how respectfully you express your emotions, they are treated as if they are inconveniences, rather than something worthy of attention. Instead of feeling heard, you leave conversations feeling guilty for speaking at all. This is where many people unknowingly begin abandoning themselves. Healthy relationships are built on emotional respect. That doesn't mean both people always agree. It doesn't mean every conflict is resolved perfectly. It simply means both individuals recognize that each person's feelings deserve to be acknowledged. Even when perspectives differ, respect remains. When someone consistently minimizes your emotions, they're sending a subtle message without ever saying the words directly. Your experience doesn't matter as much as my comfort. That message is incredibly damaging because the human heart naturally seeks acceptance. When acceptance isn't given freely, many people start changing themselves to earn it. You begin speaking less. You stop bringing up issues that bother you. You convince yourself that your expectations are too high. Instead of asking whether your needs are reasonable, you start questioning whether you deserve to have needs at all. This is one of the most dangerous mental shifts a person can experience. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack every single day. At first, you notice the weight immediately. But after carrying it long enough, your body adapts. The burden begins to feel normal. You stop noticing how exhausted you are because you've forgotten what it feels like to walk freely. The same thing happens emotionally. Constant dismissal becomes familiar. Emotional neglect becomes routine. Silence begins replacing honesty. You no longer expect understanding because disappointment has become predictable. Over time, you become skilled at reading their emotions while completely ignoring your own. Before saying anything important, you first ask yourself, will this upset them? Instead of asking, is this something I genuinely need to express? Your emotional world slowly starts revolving around protecting theirs. That isn't love. That's fear disguised as compromise. A relationship should never require you to edit your heart just to keep the peace. True emotional safety exists when both people can express joy, disappointment, fear, and vulnerability without worrying that they'll be criticized or ignored. Think about the healthiest friendships you've ever experienced. You may not have agreed on everything, but you probably felt safe enough to be honest. You knew your feelings would be heard, even if solutions weren't immediate. Romantic relationships should offer at least that same level of emotional security. Instead, many people find themselves apologizing simply for having emotions. They say things like, "I'm sorry for bothering you," or "maybe I'm overthinking," before they've even explained what's wrong. Those apologies aren't signs of humility. They're often signs that someone has been conditioned to believe their emotional reality is inconvenient. The tragedy is that emotional neglect rarely happens all at once. It unfolds through countless small moments. A conversation that ends too quickly. A concern that gets laughed off. Tears that are met with discomfort instead of compassion. Needs that are labeled as weakness instead of humanity. Each moment alone may seem insignificant. Together, they reshape how you see yourself. You begin measuring your worth by how little you ask for. You pride yourself on being low maintenance. You convince yourself that needing reassurance is a flaw instead of recognizing it as a completely natural human desire. But healthy love doesn't make you feel guilty for wanting emotional connection. Healthy love welcomes honest communication because it understands that relationships grow stronger when both people feel seen. There is a profound difference between someone who occasionally struggles to respond emotionally and someone who consistently refuses to make space for your feelings. Everyone has imperfect moments. Everyone gets overwhelmed. But a caring partner returns to the conversation. They listen. They apologize when necessary. They make an effort to understand your experience, even if they don't fully relate to it. That willingness changes everything. Because love is not measured by how perfectly someone responds in every moment. It is measured by whether they value your heart enough to keep showing up for it. Never confuse emotional endurance with emotional health. Staying silent to avoid conflict may preserve the relationship temporarily, but it slowly erodes the person you are becoming. A love that requires you to ignore your own emotional needs is asking you to pay for connection with your own peace. Your feelings are not burdens. They are not interruptions. They are not evidence that you are asking for too much. They are signals pointing toward what your heart needs to feel safe, respected, and valued. The right relationship will never require you to shrink your emotions just to make someone else comfortable. It will encourage honesty, welcome vulnerability, and remind you through consistent actions that your voice matters. Because real love doesn't merely tolerate your feelings. It creates a place where they can finally breathe. There comes a point in some relationships where you suddenly realize you've become the only one keeping the connection alive. It doesn't happen overnight. It develops so gradually that you barely notice it at first. You tell yourself you're simply being supportive. You're making the extra effort because relationships require work. You're reaching out because communication is important. But eventually, an uncomfortable truth begins to surface. If you stop trying, would the relationship continue at all? That's one of the hardest questions anyone can ask themselves. Love should involve effort, but it should never become a one-person mission. A healthy relationship is like two people rowing the same boat. They may not row with the exact same rhythm every moment, but both are moving in the same direction. When only one person is rowing while the other simply watches, the boat doesn't move forward. It spins in circles, exhausting the person doing all the work. Many people become trapped in this cycle because they mistake persistence for love. They believe that if they keep proving their loyalty, eventually the other person will recognize their value. So they continue sending the first message. They make the first phone call. They plan every meeting. They apologize after every disagreement, even when they weren't the one who caused the problem. They keep giving, hoping one day the relationship will finally feel balanced. But love is not supposed to feel like an endless audition. You should never have to perform constantly just to earn someone's attention or affection. When someone consistently withdraws while you consistently pursue, an unhealthy pattern begins to form. The more you chase, the more they retreat. The more they retreat, the harder you chase, because you're afraid of losing them. Without realizing it, the relationship stops being built on genuine connection and starts being driven by fear. Fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear that if you stop trying, everything will fall apart. The painful irony is that the harder you chase, the more you begin losing yourself. Your happiness becomes dependent on their responses. A single text message can determine your mood for the entire day. If they seem warm, you feel hopeful. If they become distant, anxiety immediately takes over. Your emotional stability slowly becomes controlled by someone else's inconsistency. That is an exhausting way to live. Real love should add peace to your life, not keep you trapped in a constant cycle of uncertainty. Over time, something else begins to happen. You stop expecting effort from them because you've accepted the role of carrying the relationship alone. You tell yourself they're just not expressive. They're independent. They need more space. You keep lowering your expectations until the bare minimum starts feeling like a grand gesture. A simple reply suddenly feels exciting. A brief compliment feels extraordinary. A small amount of attention feels like proof that things are finally improving. But when basic kindness starts feeling like a rare reward, something has become deeply unbalanced. Healthy relationships are built on mutual investment. Both people make time. Both people ask questions. Both people show curiosity about each other's lives. Both people initiate conversations. Both people notice when something feels wrong and make an effort to repair it. No one keeps score in a healthy relationship because neither person feels like they're Hughes, carrying all the weight. Think about how nature works. A plant cannot survive if only one root receives water while the rest are left dry. Eventually, the entire plant begins to weaken. Relationships follow the same principle. Emotional nourishment must flow in both directions. If only one person is giving encouragement, patience, forgiveness, affection, and effort, the relationship slowly begins to wither. Many people continue chasing because they confuse someone's potential with their reality. They remember the version of the person they first met. They hold on to the occasional moments of warmth and convince themselves those moments represent who the person truly is. They overlook months of emotional distance because they're waiting for those rare moments to return. Hope can be beautiful, but hope without evidence can also become a prison. Someone's potential cannot build a future. Only their consistent actions can. Another hidden danger of constantly chasing someone is that you begin measuring your worth by how successful you are at keeping them close. If they pull away, you assume you weren't loving enough. If they become distant, you search for flaws within yourself. You replay conversations over and over, wondering what you could have done differently. Meanwhile, you rarely stop to ask a far more important question. Are they putting in the same effort to keep me? Healthy love doesn't require one person to carry the emotional weight of two lives. It doesn't expect one heart to endlessly pursue another that refuses to move. True connection happens when two people willingly choose each other again and again. Not because one is afraid of being left behind, but because both recognize the value of walking side by side. There is incredible freedom in realizing that you are not responsible for convincing someone to love you. You are not responsible for chasing someone into emotional maturity. You cannot force another person to become available simply because you care deeply enough. Love offered freely is powerful. Love begged for loses its peace. The moment you stop chasing, you begin seeing the relationship more clearly. You recognize how much energy you've been spending trying to hold together something that was never meant to rest on your shoulders alone. And in that moment, you remember a truth that can change your life forever. The right person won't make you feel like you're running a race just to stay in their life. They will meet you halfway, match your effort, and remind you through consistent actions not empty promises, that love is a partnership, never a pursuit. One of the most convincing illusions in any relationship is the belief that words alone are evidence of change. When someone looks into your eyes and says, "I'll do better," your heart naturally wants to believe them. When they promise they'll communicate more, become emotionally available, or stop repeating the same hurtful patterns, hope begins to rise again. You remember why you fell in love with them in the first place. You imagine a future where everything finally falls into place. Hope is powerful. It has the ability to keep people standing when everything around them seems uncertain. But hope becomes dangerous when it is built on promises instead of patterns. A promise can comfort you for a moment, but only consistent action can transform a relationship. Many people become trapped in an endless cycle that looks almost identical every time. Something happens that creates emotional distance. You express your pain, they realize you become serious about leaving or that the relationship is reaching a breaking point. Suddenly, they become everything you've been asking them to be. They apologize sincerely. They promise to change. They reassure you that things will be different from now on. For a few days, everything seems better. They text more often. They become affectionate again. They listen more carefully. You feel relieved because it appears that your patience has finally paid off. Then, slowly and almost unnoticed, old habits begin returning. The messages become shorter. The effort becomes inconsistent. Emotional distance quietly settles back into the relationship. Before long, you're facing the exact same problems that existed before the promise was ever made. This repeated cycle is emotionally exhausting because every new promise resets your expectations. It convinces you to ignore the past and invest your heart one more time. After all, people deserve second chances. Sometimes they deserve third chances. Growth isn't always immediate, and no one changes overnight. But there is an important difference between someone who is genuinely growing and someone who only changes long enough to prevent losing you. Real transformation isn't driven by fear of consequences. It is driven by commitment to becoming better. Someone who truly wants to grow doesn't wait until you're growed, walking out the door before they begin changing. They recognize the damage their actions have caused, and they take responsibility long before the relationship reaches a crisis. Their motivation comes from love, not panic. This is why actions carry far more weight than promises. Words tell you what someone hopes to become. Actions reveal who they have chosen to be. Imagine planting a seed in the ground. Every day you stand over it saying, "Grow, become a tree, produce fruit." Those words may be sincere, but they accomplish nothing without water, sunlight, and consistent care. In the same way, relationships cannot grow on verbal intentions alone. They require daily choices, small acts of kindness, honest conversations, emotional presence, accountability. These are the things that create lasting change. One of the greatest mistakes people make is falling in love with potential instead of reality. They hold tightly to who someone could become while ignoring who they consistently show themselves to be. Potential is inspiring, but it cannot build trust. Trust is built when actions remain steady, long after emotions settle down. Consistency is one of the clearest signs of emotional maturity. Anyone can behave differently for a week. Anyone can become affectionate after a serious argument. Anyone can make beautiful promises when they're afraid of losing someone. The true test comes after life returns to normal. Do they continue making the effort when there is no immediate reward? Do they communicate when things are calm instead of only during conflict? Do they remember the commitments they made even after the emotional intensity has faded? These questions reveal the difference between temporary motivation and genuine character. Another danger of repeated empty promises is what they do to your own heart. Every broken commitment slowly weakens your ability to trust. You begin questioning every kind word, wondering how long it will last this time. Instead of feeling secure, you live in a constant state of cautious optimism. You want to believe them, but experience keeps reminding you to be careful. This creates emotional confusion. Your mind remembers the disappointment. Your heart clings to hope. You find yourself caught between what they've said and what they've repeatedly done. Eventually, you begin settling for progress that never truly arrives. You celebrate small improvements while overlooking the larger pattern. A single week of effort makes you forget months of emotional absence. A heartfelt apology causes you to ignore repeated behavior that continues causing pain. But lasting love cannot be built on isolated moments of improvement. It is built on dependable patterns. Real change is quiet. It doesn't need constant announcements. It doesn't require repeated promises. It simply becomes visible through everyday behavior. You notice it because conversations become healthier. Conflicts become opportunities for growth instead of distance. Trust slowly returns because actions consistently match words. That is how genuine transformation looks. Never allow beautiful language to distract you from consistent reality. Listen carefully to what someone says, but pay even closer attention to what they repeatedly do. Character is revealed through habits, not speeches. Integrity is demonstrated through consistency, not intentions. The strongest relationships are not sustained by endless promises of a better tomorrow. They are strengthened by two people who choose, day after day, to honor each other through their actions. Because in the end, love is never proven by what someone says they will do. It is proven by what they quietly continue doing long after the promises have been made. Perhaps the most heartbreaking sign that something is deeply wrong in a relationship is not that the other person has changed. It's that you have. Not in the healthy way that love is supposed to transform people, but in the quiet, invisible way that slowly causes you to lose sight of who you truly are. It rarely happens all at once. No one wakes up one morning and decides to abandon their own identity. Instead, it happens through hundreds of tiny compromises that seem harmless in the moment. You stop mentioning certain topics because they always make the other person uncomfortable. You stop expressing your opinions because disagreements usually lead to emotional distance. You begin filtering your personality, carefully choosing every word, every reaction, and every emotion in an effort to avoid triggering another withdrawal. Without realizing it, you're no longer living authentically. You're performing. You become so focused on protecting the relationship that you stop protecting yourself. At first, it feels like love. After all, compromise is necessary in every healthy relationship. Sometimes you choose patience over pride. Sometimes you let small things go because peace matters more than being right. Those are signs of maturity. But there is a profound difference between healthy compromise and self-abandonment. Compromise allows both people to feel respected. Self-abandonment requires only one person to disappear. When you constantly sacrifice your own emotional needs to keep someone else comfortable, the relationship slowly begins to revolve around their fears instead of mutual growth. Every decision becomes centered on avoiding conflict. Every conversation becomes carefully rehearsed. You spend more time thinking about how they might react than about what your own heart genuinely needs. That is not emotional safety. That is emotional captivity. Imagine a beautiful garden filled with vibrant flowers. Every flower represents a different part of who you are. Your confidence, your dreams, your joy, your passions, your friendships, your sense of humor, your creativity, and your inner peace. Now imagine watering only one corner of that garden, while allowing everything else to slowly dry out. Eventually, the garden no longer reflects its original beauty. The same thing happens within you. When all your emotional energy is invested in maintaining someone else's comfort, the parts of yourself that once made you feel alive begin to fade. You stop pursuing hobbies you once loved. You spend less time with friends who brought out the best in you. Your goals become secondary because your attention is constantly pulled toward managing the each relationship. Slowly, your world becomes smaller. One of the greatest dangers of loving someone who consistently avoids emotional intimacy is that you begin believing your own needs are the problem. You think, maybe I'm expecting too much. Or, if I were more patient, things would improve. You convince yourself that asking for communication, affection, consistency, or reassurance somehow makes you difficult. So instead of expecting more from the relationship, you expect less from yourself. You silence your voice. You ignore your intuition. You dismiss the uneasy feeling in your heart because they become convinced that keeping the peace is more important than speaking the truth. But peace built on silence is not real peace. It's simply postponed pain. Every unspoken emotion remains inside you. Every ignored disappointment adds another layer of emotional exhaustion. Over time, you become disconnected from your own instincts because you've spent so long prioritizing someone else's emotional world over your own. The tragedy is that many people mistake this emotional shrinking for loyalty. They say, I'm just being supportive. I'm trying to understand them. I'm standing by them because I love them. Love certainly requires compassion. It requires forgiveness. It requires grace. But genuine love should never require you to erase yourself in order to keep another person comfortable. Healthy relationships don't ask you to become less. They inspire you to become more. The right person doesn't feel threatened by your confidence. They celebrate it. They don't make you feel guilty for having boundaries. They respect them. They don't expect you to sacrifice your identity for the relationship. They encourage you to continue growing into the person you're meant to become. Real love creates expansion. Unhealthy attachment creates limitation. Think back to the person you were before fear entered the relationship. Remember how freely you laughed, how confidently you made decisions, how naturally you expressed your thoughts without worrying about whether someone would withdraw because of them. That version of you wasn't perfect, but it was authentic. Authenticity is one of the greatest gifts you can offer any relationship. If someone can only love the edited version of you, the version that stays quiet, asks for nothing, expects little, and constantly adapts to their emotional comfort, then they are not truly loving you. They are loving the version of you that requires the least effort from them. That realization can be painful, but it can also be incredibly freeing, because the moment you recognize that you've been disappearing, you also realize you have the power to return to yourself. You can begin speaking honestly again. You can reconnect with the dreams you've neglected. You can rebuild friendships, rediscover passions, and reclaim the confidence that slowly slipped away. Most importantly, you can remember that your identity is not something to negotiate away in exchange for someone's more affection. The healthiest relationships are never built on one person becoming smaller so the other can remain comfortable. They are built on two whole individuals who support each other's growth, encourage each other's purpose, and create an environment where both people feel safe to be completely themselves. Never underestimate the value of remaining true to who you are. Love should strengthen your spirit, not diminish it. It should give you the freedom to grow, to speak, to dream, and to live with confidence. The moment a relationship consistently demands that you sacrifice your identity to preserve its stability, it stops being a place of connection and starts becoming a place of quiet surrender. And no relationship is worth losing the person you were created to be. One of the clearest signs that it's time to let go of an unhealthy relationship is not simply that you're unhappy. It's that you've stopped growing. Somewhere along the journey, your life has become less about becoming the person you were, and more about managing someone else's emotional distance. Instead of moving forward with purpose, you're standing still, waiting for things to change. Growth is one of the greatest indicators of a healthy relationship. Real love doesn't trap you. It expands you. It encourages you to pursue your dreams, strengthen your character, deepen your confidence, and become the best version of yourself. The right relationship becomes a source of strength that empowers you to face life's challenges with greater courage. But when a relationship consistently leaves you emotionally drained, everything begins to slow down. You stop focusing on your own future because all your attention is consumed by the present, uncertainty. Your ambitions begin collecting dust. The goals that once excited you now seem distant because your emotional energy is constantly being spent trying to understand someone who refuses to let you in completely. Think about how much mental space uncertainty occupies. You replay conversations. You analyze text messages. You wonder whether they're pulling away again. You question whether you said the wrong thing. You spend hours trying to solve emotional puzzles that have no clear answers. And every ounce of that energy could have been invested in building your future. Instead, it's spent trying to preserve a relationship that keeps asking you to wait. Waiting becomes your lifestyle. You wait for them to communicate. You wait for them to become emotionally available. You wait for them to heal. You wait for them to commit. You wait for them to finally choose the relationship the way you've already chosen it. At first, waiting feels temporary. You tell yourself, just a little more time. Then weeks become months. Months become years. Before you realize it, precious seasons of your life have quietly disappeared. Time is the one resource no one ever gets back. Money can be earned again. Opportunities can return. Even broken confidence can be rebuilt. But time only moves in one direction. That is why staying in a relationship that continually keeps you emotionally stuck carries a cost that many people don't recognize until much later. The cost isn't only heartbreak, it's lost potential. Imagine standing at the edge of a beautiful mountain trail that leads toward breathtaking views, personal growth, meaningful friendships, exciting opportunities, and a future filled with purpose. But instead of walking the path, you remain standing at the entrance, because someone keeps telling you they'll join you soon. So you wait. Every day you believe tomorrow will be different. Meanwhile, the seasons change around you. The trail remains unexplored. The life waiting ahead remains untouched. This is exactly what emotional stagnation looks like. You postpone your own journey while waiting for someone else to begin theirs. Healthy relationships never ask you to pause your life indefinitely. They inspire movement. They encourage learning. They celebrate progress. When two emotionally healthy people come together, they don't stop growing as individuals. They actually become catalysts for each other's development. One person's success becomes a reason for celebration rather than insecurity. Challenges become opportunities to grow together instead of reasons to create distance. That is what partnership looks like. Growth is shared. Support is mutual. Progress belongs to both people. But in an unhealthy dynamic, your world slowly becomes smaller. You stop taking risks because you're emotionally exhausted. You lose motivation to pursue goals because your mind is constantly occupied by relationship, uncertainty. Even your physical health can begin suffering. Stress affects sleep. Sleep affects energy. Energy affects motivation. Before long, every area of life begins reflecting the emotional instability you've been carrying. Perhaps the saddest part is that many people don't recognize this decline because they've become accustomed to surviving rather than thriving. Survival becomes normal. Peace feels unfamiliar. Chaos begins feeling predictable. You become so focused on getting through each emotional setback that you forget life was meant to be experienced with joy, curiosity, purpose, and hope. Relationships should contribute to your growth, not consume the very energy required to pursue it. This doesn't mean every relationship will always feel easy. Every meaningful connection goes through difficult seasons. Challenges are inevitable. Disagreements are natural. Personal struggles are part of being human. The difference lies in what those challenges produce. Healthy struggles lead to greater understanding. Unhealthy struggles lead to repeated stagnation. Healthy love leaves both people wiser than before. Unhealthy attachment leaves both people emotionally stuck in the same painful cycle. There comes a moment when you must honestly ask yourself a difficult question. Am I becoming the person I want to be while remaining in this relationship? If the answer has consistently been no, if you've stopped dreaming, stopped growing, stopped believing in your own future, then the relationship may no longer be serving your highest good. Remember this powerful truth. Your purpose was never meant to be postponed while waiting for someone else's. AC emotional readiness. Your dreams deserve attention. Your gifts deserve expression. Your future deserves movement. Life is far too precious to spend it standing in one emotional place, hoping someone else will eventually decide to walk beside you. The healthiest love will never chain you to uncertainty. It will encourage you to keep becoming, keep learning, keep creating, and keep moving toward the life you were meant to live. And if a relationship repeatedly prevents that growth instead of nurturing it, choosing to walk away is not abandoning love. It is choosing the future that has been patiently waiting for you all along.